Tonight on Talking Politics, the battle over the future of Boston's White Stadium as a new lawsuit challenges Mayor Wu's plans to partner with a new women's professional soccer team to fund a multi-million-dollar renovation and then share the stadium. I'll speak to two of the plaintiffs ahead. But first,
that was a very poor choice of words. It's not how we do things. It's not how we operate.
In a rare move, Governor Maura Healey publicly rebuked her transportation secretary, Monica Tibbetts-Nutt, over these comments about ways to raise more money for the MBTA.
I'm going to talk about tolling. I'm going to talk about charging TNCs more. I'm going to talk about potentially charging more for package deliveries, charging more for payroll tax, basically going after everybody who has money. And when I'm talking tolling, I'm talking at the borders.
That line about border tolls in particular has sparked a lot of coverage and a lot of outrage from both Republicans and some Democrats. So what does it mean for the efforts to fund the T? Former Massachusetts Transportation Secretary James Aloisi joins me now, along with Commonwealth Beacon editor Bruce Moll. Thank you both for being here, and good to see you. Bruce, you watched and wrote up Monica Tibbetts-Nutt's speech to Walk Boston, Walk Massachusetts, the advocacy group, before anyone else was paying attention to this. What, to your eye, made it unusual? Was it the content of what she said, for example, saying she was looking for any possible way to raise revenue to fund the T, including border tolls, or was it the tone of how she said it, or was it both?
It was a little bit of both. Actually, the person that told me about the speech was talking about some other element that she had talked about, which was big to his personal project, the I-90 Alston project. And I started listening, and it was really her tone that she was very free and outgoing about it. And in the past, I've had a lot of dealings with her, watched her, and she seemed to be always fairly cautious about her dealings. But in front of this group, she seemed very comfortable and freewheeling and just letting it loose. And it was sort of how she said it at times that made you take note.
Just to give people a sense, you can go online and you can find the speech, but I want to drop in little portions of it to give people a sense of exactly what you're talking about. Let's take a quick look at a point in the speech where she talks about basically the power of the bully pulpit when you are transportation secretary, as she is.
The beauty of a microphone in all these different places, especially when it's being recorded, once I say it, it's there. You don't have to deal with it. I will 100% use that as a weapon. Because once I say it, it is now a policy. I have now weighed in.
Jim Aloisi, when I was watching this, I found myself thinking, I can't remember the last time I saw any member of an administration speak this unguardedly in a public context. Is that, as someone who's done the job that Tibbetts-Nutt is doing now, am I right to see the candor that Bruce described as unusual?
I think it's rare. But I'm not necessarily thinking it's a bad thing either. I've said in response to this that I think if what we get is the opposite of this, which is sort of secretaries, cabinet officials, public officials who sort of publicly do nothing but parrot a speech and give anodyne remarks that really don't tell us anything, then I don't think that's really helpful, right? I mean, it's interesting, Adam. We say we want transparency in government, but when we get transparency, then we react negatively to it. So, I think the secretary was in front of a friendly crowd, and she certainly seemed at ease and unfiltered and unguarded. And maybe it's a good thing that we actually have a window into how she thinks, because she is an important public official. It doesn't mean that everything she thinks will become policy, but it certainly is important to understand that. So I'm empathetic to her position, and I would hope that as a civic society that we would not beat up on people just because they've aired their views candidly. I mean, think about what that would mean.
Now, one of the tricky parts to what you're saying, there's the question of how it goes over with the public, there's the question of how it's reported in the media, but also the question of how it might be received by her boss, Maura Healey, the governor, who might not be happy if Tibbetts Nuts gets out ahead of her skis on matters of policy. I want to roll a statement from a Mass DOT transportation spokesperson, who said the secretary was conveying in this appearance that we need to have difficult conversations about how to make our transportation system work best for anyone. This task force, this transportation funding task force that Tibbetts Nutt leads, is in its early stages, and no decisions have been made about its potential recommendations. Any proposals would be made in collaboration with the legislature and other stakeholders, and would carefully consider any affordability and competitiveness implications. Bruce Mohl, that's, am I right to read that statement, listen to that statement, and think, okay, this is the administration trying to say effectively Monica Tibbetts Nutt got way out ahead of where she should have been?
I think so. That came out on a Friday, and I think that was their way of sort of saying, you know, she's not unilaterally dictating anything or
what she says is not, in fact, policy.
That's right. That's right. But then you have to remember that on Monday, unprompted by, maybe prompted by the weekend's coverage, the governor then said she doesn't speak for me on this toll issue. Just on the toll issue, she said at that point. So something shifted, I think, between the earlier statement that was done out of Mass DOT, but in coordination with the governor's office, and then the governor's own statement.
She came out and said that on Monday, and then she also made an appearance on Radio Boston, on WBUR, in which she said this was a very poor choice of words. So the rebukes seemed to continue. I want to pull back just a little bit. Jim, can you give people a sense of what Monica Tibbetts Nutt's reputation is when it comes to transportation and thinking about transportation issues and making policy around transportation issues? Because that's an important bit of context here.
Her reputation, particularly among transit insiders and advocates, is actually quite strong, right? Monica was the vice chair of the MBTA's Fiscal Management and Control Board for its entire, I forget how long they were in place, 7 years. She knows the details and the facts about the MBTA inside and out. She's smart, she's tough, as you could see, and she has a set of values about sustainable mobility, about the role that transportation plays in our society. And they're generally values that I think are consensus values among most people in Metro Boston. Whether that came through in this kerfuffle or not is a question, but she's known to be, as I say, a sort of reliable ally for people who care about issues like mode shifting transportation, reducing climate emissions, providing more access to people equitably, all of these issues, which is what she talked about mostly in that speech and in her remarks. I think the content of those remarks, there's about 5 minutes out of a 45-minute speech where she talked about revenue. And of course, anytime you talk about revenue in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, you're bound to annoy some people. And she annoyed, you know, why are we running away from a conversation about ideas just because, frankly, a fringe, what I consider a fringe right-wing anti-tax group set a tear on fire because they don't like the word tolls.
You're referring to Mass Fiscal, right? And it's,
yeah,
you know, Mass Fiscal jumped on this. The conservative columnists at the Boston Herald jumped on this. It made the Daily Mail.
Right, exactly. So what we've seen here basically is a right-wing ideological response to what ought to be a carefully thought out conversation, which we need to have in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, about two things. How are we going to structurally repair the T's financial situation, which is something that is a short-term urgent requirement? And then how are we going to replace the gas tax when it becomes when it goes down to zero when everyone's driving an electric car? These
something
are
that you championed back in the day as transportation secretary.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, you know, and I've written about this in Commonwealth Beacon, and we know it's a conversation we need to have. The secretary, in her own way that day, unfiltered, was having part of that conversation.
She was having the conversation about revenue that you mentioned, but Bruce, I feel like it's worth highlighting that She was also having other conversations. I was struck by the way she described this ongoing project to get lead paint off the Tobin Bridge. Advocacy groups, one particular advocacy group has drawn attention to the fact that paint chips are falling in neighborhoods in Chelsea where this work is being done. We actually don't have a clip of Tittes not addressing that, but I was struck at the sincerity with which she basically said the state has really dropped the ball here. We've gotten this wrong. I'm sorry. We're going to try to clean up the mess we've made, but this isn't okay that this has happened, which was, again, it's just unusual to hear a state policymaker say we dropped the ball here, and I'm paraphrasing, but I think that captures the spirit of it. She also made a comment about pickup trucks, which I think added fuel to the fire that we're talking about here. We do have a clip of that. She's basically saying that she's not a fan of Ford F-150s and other gargantuan pickup trucks that we're seeing on the road in increasing amounts. Let's take a look.
We can't price them high enough or put enough fees on them enough that's going to stop the type of person who wants to buy that car. And I am 100% passing judgment on someone who wants to drive basically an 18-wheeler as their personal car. We have no control over it.
That's one reason.
There's nothing we can do.
That's one reason that this took off the way it did, right? Because that added a sort of a culture war component to the overall conversation she was having.
Absolutely. And I think Jim's right that she's very well respected. She's also, I would say, a bit to the left in a lot of ways. She was a chief architect of the discounted fare for low-income riders on the T. It's been a passion of hers for a long time, and it became a passion of the governor's as well. What this whole thing sort of shows, though, is sort of where does the governor stand on this? You know, declaring this border toll issue off the table.
Yeah.
I talked to Senator Brendan Crichton, who's on this task force looking at new revenues, and the chair of the Transportation Committee, and he says—
Task force that Tibbetts not chairs.
That's right. And he said, I don't think it should be off the table. I think everything's got to be on the table when we're looking at this.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that raises what I think is the most important question here. If you are a fan, as Jim, you are, of Tibbetts Nutt's progressive thinking when it comes to transportation issues, is this whole episode going to make it difficult for her to advance the sort of solutions that she would like to advance? And might it make it hard to advance ideas that would have been viable if she hadn't been caught on camera giving the kind of address that she gave the other day?
I mean, I think, we have to let's be candid and say this past week hasn't been a great week in terms of the ability of anyone, including the secretary, to sort of calmly advance a discussion on these issues. But I think it will pass. And it's not a discretionary conversation, Adam. I mean, it's just a necessary conversation. Personally, I would not have raised a topic like border tolls, because I think the solution, if you're going to price roads, we're going to have a regional Massachusetts road pricing system in place, not just at the border. People have to get used to the idea that because of the transition to clean energy vehicles, the gas tax will no longer be providing $800 million a year into the Highway Trust Fund in Massachusetts. We need a replacement. We don't need to do that tomorrow, but that's the conversation we need to have. And I think part of that conversation will end up being a regional, fair, equitable road pricing system that you can means test that. You can have it regionally fair so that Senator Spilka's concerns are allayed. And so, yeah, I think the conversation temporarily may have been set back, but it's not a conversation that we can avoid, and it's one that will have to be engaged in an earnest way over the next several years.
Bruce Moll, sorry to interrupt you.
I just want to make a point. The urgent conversation that no one's talking about enough is what do we do with the MBTA's fiscal situation after the fiscal 2025? It will hit a fiscal cliff unless the legislature and the governor find new stable revenue sources for the T's operating budget. This is a critical short-term issue that we actually need to be addressing in the moment.
Bruce, you're going to get the last word here. Back in 2021, David Isme, who was Governor Baker's undersecretary for climate, ended up resigning after he was caught on camera addressing advocates in Vermont And the quote that I think really sort of did him in, made him tender his resignation, was he said the government needed to effectively break the will of ordinary men and women in order to get carbon emissions reduced. And he ended up resigning because the situation became untenable. Do you expect that Monica Tibbetts is going to be staying in her post, or is she in some sort of jeopardy moving forward, do you think?
Well, I'll give you, I don't have a sound answer to that one, but I'll give you two things. One is, so she came in as the number 2 person under Healy in transportation, and her, the secretary that she came in with had to leave under a very big cloud. And it appeared that Healy forced her out. So it would be very unusual, very difficult to now force a second one out so soon. But on the other hand, I was at the MBTA board meeting on Friday, and it's a board that Monica Tibbetts sits on. And everybody was there, but she came in via Zoom. And she voted a couple times, but otherwise said nothing. And maybe that's not a big deal, but they were having a discussion about revenues and what the political coalition that needs to be built to secure revenues.
Exactly the stuff we've been talking about
and
here.
She didn't weigh in or didn't say anything and said, I can do this. So it looked weird.
That's telling. I could imagine, and again, I'm speculating here, but in the moment being told or believing that you need to sort of pull back. Once you've had an episode like this, I think that could be a natural inclination, at least for a bit. We have to leave it there. Bruce, Mole, Jim, Aloisi, thank you both for talking this stuff through.
Thanks, Adam.
Next up, for more than 70 years, White Stadium at Franklin Park has been used by the Boston Public Schools, but over the years, it's slowly deteriorated, and now it is in desperate need of repair. That's why the city's teaming up with the group behind a new professional women's soccer team, the Boston Unity, to completely renovate and then share the stadium. Mayor Michelle Wu says Boston schools will still have plenty of access, but a group of local activists and advocates argue that Wu is effectively trying to privatize a public space, and they are suing the city to try to stop the deal. I'm joined now by two of them, Louis Elisa, co-founder and former president of the Franklin Park Coalition, and Renee Stacy Welch, a longtime JP and Roxbury resident. Thank you both for being here. Renee,
Thank you.
Let me start with you. From your vantage point, why is Mayor Wu's plan for the stadium a bad idea?
I think it's a bad idea because I think it's going to basically stop the community from using the park. When you look at the development and you look at not just the stadium, but how far outside of that stadium walls that they're going to build this soccer team or group, I think it's going to basically hinder the amount of time that we use our park. And I think furthermore, if you look at the Boston school systems, I don't think the kids are going to get the amount of time that they say they're going to get, because there's no way it's just going to be soccer. It's going to be every other thing that they can think of to put into that space.
You anticipate that there will be other private uses beyond soccer that the stadium will be used for. That's your...
Correct.
Now, has the mayor... why do you think that?
$30 million just for soccer? There's going to be other things happening there. So when they say that it is 20 weekends a month for games, what about the practices? People come and watch practices. So that's another 20, so that's 40. Then you have to think about concerts. These are things that are going to happen in this space.
Louis, Lisa, let me go to you, and I want to make sure that I get the price tag right here. Is it $80 million total that we're talking about?
$80 million is what's been proposed. $50 million by the Boston Public Schools through the mayor's office, and $30 million by the soccer league.
Yes. So why do you think it's a bad idea?
Well, we don't have to guess. They've said that they're going to use the White Stadium for other activities other than just soccer. And because the way they've positioned it, we don't know what the Boston Public Schools is going to do. The neglect that has taken place in the stadium, particularly that's in Franklin Park, has been by the Boston Public Schools and the public facilities for over 35 years. They failed to keep it up. They failed to repair it when it was broken. And they failed to, in a sense, support athletics in the Boston Public Schools. So we know it's going to be used in the concerns of the residents in the community and those who like Franklin Park because of its historic basis. They're concerned that what other activities are going to take place may change the quality of access and use for Franklin Park.
So one thing that I'm hearing here, which I think deserves to be stressed, is that you're not only concerned about access for Boston public school students, although that's a concern of yours. You feel like the community's access to the park is at stake here, right?
Well, the residents of Jamaica Plain, who we met with, along with Ben Weber, their city council the other night, there were about 30 in the room, and they raised concerns about how do they get to the playground, how do they move around the areas that are being built out on the east side of the campus of the stadium, and what goes on during game days. So the issue is not just game days and the practice days that they've now acknowledged, but the other activities that are going on.
Renee, I want to get you to weigh in on what the mayor is saying as she makes the case for this plan. Here she is on our show, Boston Public Radio, a few days ago.
Mm-hmm. The number of hours that Boston Public School students will be able to use White Stadium is just going to be exponentially more. It will more than triple. The number of hours that football will use the stadium may actually end up being the same or even more than it is right now, because we will have the capacity to host home end of season games for all of the teams in the district, not just for the home games for the two of them here. The impact of having a stadium with functional plumbing and locker rooms and the seating that can create an experience that will be worth more than trying to just tie together some of the loose threads. And
are you meeting with?
So proponents, including the mayor, have talked about a new soccer field that students are going to be able to use, an expanded track, a rebuilt grandstand, new locker rooms, handicapped accessibility, and everything that we just heard there. That doesn't entice you at all?
The stadium has to be renovated. It must be renovated for our kids. She did say something about football. They've already said that football can't be played on this field because the rough and tumble of the cleats and things of that nature.
For the natural grass
so she just
until
said,
the end of the soccer,
right,
women's professional
right,
soccer.
but then what happens in November? Who wants to play football what students are going to play football in December, January, February on that field? So the time that our kids are going to have access to it, it's not the beautiful weekends and the weekends and weekdays of the good weather.
Just a little bit at the very end, and you don't think that's enough?
No, I don't.
Okay. Louis, can you explain what happened last month? You had gone to a judge asking for a temporary restraining order to basically halt work on this project. The judge didn't go along with that, and the city is claiming that as a major victory, saying it essentially shows that there aren't sound legal grounds for the suit that you're bringing. Do you still believe that there are sound legal grounds, even though the judge rejected that request?
Most certainly, and judges made mistakes before. I'm a victim of Judge Scott's decisions, and other decisions in the past have been made, legal decisions that have not been best for the people that they made decisions against. The decision was against the community and not against any conservancy or any group. We asked them to halt any demolition and destruction in Franklin Park, and particularly at White Stadium, until there could be a complete review by the Landmark Commission and other groups who says that these places should not be moved. The other piece is that they've never given us a full explanation from the city's part, for the Boston Public Schools, as what the new design would look like. So the extra 3 acres that they're taking to expand on, we as a community don't know how that will be used on our behalf.
You mentioned the Landmarks Commission. Probably worth noting that the head of the Landmarks Commission has been removed by Mayor Wu, and that the entire Landmarks Commission volunteer board sent this letter expressing concern about review processes in the city, focusing on, at least at the beginning of their letter, this particular project, right?
Yes.
Was that a big deal?
Of course it was. I think for me, it shows that, so someone spoke out against this. Somebody, like the Landmarks Commission said that this doesn't work. These are the problems. These are the things that we see problematic with what you're doing, and all of a sudden someone is terminated. That makes no sense to me. Why wasn't that person able to keep their job and be able to share their concerns with what's happening in our city and these beautiful public assets that we have? So that's a little concerned, but it's not the first time for the mayor, right? Even on this development, she said, if we don't let this go, what happens to the $50 million? She says it's off the table. We don't get it.
Right.
That's alarming. That's alarming.
Joan Vanacki of the Boston Globe wrote a column a day or two ago in which she said, her argument effectively is, this is another example of Mayor Wu deciding that she's going to make a particular policy, take a particular action, and then trying to get community buy-in after the fact. Do you agree with that? Of
course. I mean, you see that all over the city. If you look at many developments that are coming, the Blue Hill Ave the development to put these bus lanes on Blue Hill Ave. You've decided you're already going to do it. It's already done, and no matter what people say, we're still going to do it. Same thing with several other things. You look at the Columbus Ave bus lanes. Even if you look, the only thing I can think that to say that the city won on was not moving the O'Brien to West Roxbury. She just basically said, yeah, I'm not going to do that, but that's because people fought. Not because she thought it was the right thing to do, but because people fought against it.
Louis, I want to read a statement from Boston Unity Soccer Partners and get you to react to what they have to say in regards to your lawsuit. Their statement that they provided us said in part, as indicated by the judge's ruling last month, which we've discussed, there's no legal basis to challenge this public-private community partnership. The Emerald Necklace Conservancy sentiments are not consistent with the feedback we've heard from neighbors, civic leaders, community groups, and elected officials in our more than 180 meetings and conversations since starting this process over a year and a half ago. 180 meetings sounds like a robust community engagement process. I'm wondering what it has looked like from your vantage point.
I would think a statement of that nature would start with once upon a time, because it's a fable. They haven't had 180 meetings. They've had sessions and activities taking place. I've been to about 20 meetings that they've had throughout the community in Dorchester, Roxbury, Mattapan, and Jamaica Plain. In each of the meetings, the people have said their concerns. The concerns is that the Boston Soccer League wants to come in and bring privatization. The $30 million they want to spend is to put jumbotrons to put in privatization for their fans and people who come in. But it's not necessarily to help the students. I don't think the students are going to have access to the whole stadium. I don't think they're going to be on the side where they have their offices and their box offices and they have their business space. I think that what they're doing is being a bit disingenuous. But understand, from the beginning, the community, especially Garrison Trot and some of the others, we've been more than willing to look and work with them to try to make this process work. We've just asked them for clarity. We've asked them to be transparent in what they're going to do, because we still don't know what happens beyond the 20 games and the 20 practices, what's going to take place in the additional 3 acres that are being taken, and how the park is going to be affected during game days. And we are mirroring the concerns of the Boston Zoo, Franklin Park Zoo, which is going to be severely affected if they don't come up with a plan or a process. Transportation is not just the issue.
You mentioned to me before we started talking here that you feel like, and we have to wrap up unfortunately, you feel like the park is under siege, right?
Well, the park is under siege. We've got development coming from the west, which is Shattuck Hospital, which is a bad idea from the beginning, and I've worked with that for 8 years. This organization has been in place for less than a year, and I've worked with them from the very first meeting, and then there are other things that are happening. We need to make sure Franklin Park's and Olmsted's legacy is not destroyed for just the mere fact of a dollar.
All right, we got to leave it there. Louis, Elisa, and Renee Stacy Welch, thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity.
That's it for tonight, but do come back next week, and please let us know what you think. The email is talkingpolitics@wgbh.org. The website is gbhnews.org/talkingpolitics. Thanks for watching, and good night.
Noise at the library. Check us out every week at our GBH Boston Public Library studio for live broadcasts, special events for kids and families, fascinating discussions, musical performances, and so much more. Visit our calendar for more information. See you there.
Welcome to